And during that process, they put me on a ventilator where I spent 7 additional days.
Brown was fighting for his life, and like many patients stricken with COVID-19, he was being kept alive with a ventilator. What did it physically feel like?
It's a very large grouping of tubes that goes down your throat. And, in the beginning, it wasn't horrible feeling. But as we progressed, the tube kind of got scratchy on the back of my throat and just really irritated my throat.
Were you able to communicate in some way with the ventilator in?
I could make facial expressions, which they were pretty good about understanding what I was going through, just looking at me.
Dr. Zeke Emanuel spoke with our Stephen Fabian.
What is that sensation like for the patient being put on a ventilator?
Horrible. You've got a tube stuck in your throat. Many patients are basically knocked out because of the uncomfortable feeling, and the COVID patients in particular working very hard to breathe.
The hardest part may be just beginning for survivors who've been weaned off ventilators. Many of the thousands of COVID-19 patients who've been placed on ventilators can experience post-traumatic stress disorder even a year after leaving the ICU.
They gave me the COVID-19 coronavirus test. It came back positive. And I was told I would have to be put on a ventilator. As they were getting me ready, I was just praying the Hail Mary over and over again. I was just thinking about my 2-year-old son. I want to see him graduate college. I want to see him maybe get married or have kids. I want to see him grow up. I don't want to die.
They didn't give my wife much hope at all. About the second day in, I was ready to write a note to the nurses to just kind of take me off life support. I had a lot of confusion going on, wasn't sure how I'd gotten to where I was. I had actually developed ICU delirium.
We used to think we're doing these patients a favor by keeping them completely sedated and in a medically induced coma, so that they wouldn't have any memory of this difficult time. But that kind of backfired, because unfortunately they often do have memories, but they're false memories. They took real life stimulus and turned them into something really, really scary.
The hallucinations were just unbelievable and so real.
They're not nightmares, they're memories.
Even when you're sedated, it's not like you're asleep, there is a level of consciousness.
The muted, sort of restful, peaceful look that some folks can mistaken for they're resting, they're sleeping, when in fact their brain is on fire.
Their brain, globally, what's happening, the cells aren't working right. They're not getting enough oxygen or blood pressure or food, for example. And those cells start to go awry.
So you can imagine you get critically ill, you didn't plan it, so you just wake up in a medication-induced haze. You've got a tube down your throat, your wrists may be tied, there's nobody around you that you know.
Under any other conditions, that would be considered torture. These 2 women hold my arms down while they shoved a tube up my nose was extremely traumatic. I still have such vivid memories of that. I couldn't move my arms very well until that started happening to me, and then I was flailing.
Patients would have these vivid nightmare-like experiences of people torturing them and kidnapping them. They saw blood dripping down the walls and seeing people with animal heads walking around, or children who are floating by with no faces.
We had a young patient, and he thought the nurses were restraining his arms and attaching snakes to his arms, and that was then drawing blood from him.
We've had patients who are taken from the unit to get an MRI. They're convinced that they're being moved into an oven. They may have a catheter that is removed. They're very convinced, under the influence of delirium, that someone has tried to sexually assault them. That delusional memory is quite traumatizing.
Even when the patients recover and they know that these things didn't happen, the terror is still so real.
I go home and nobody said anything to me about the hallucinations that I would have once I withdraw from all those drugs. This doesn't end when you walk out the door of the hospital.
Patients often say when they follow up with us, I was in the ICU. I don't think anything happened to my brain. It was a problem with my lungs. I think I'm going crazy.
ICU was, of course, extremely difficult, but the delirium was the hardest. When he had came home that day, when I first got to actually talk to him after 8 days, it was just like this huge relief, like, oh, we made it, everything's gonna be fine. I wasn't thinking, oh, he's gonna have delirium. That night I walked in the bathroom and he was just sitting in there and he was counting on his fingers, and I kept asking like orienting questions, like, where are you? Like, what state are we in? And he couldn't answer any of them. I was talking to his home health nurse. I was like, do we need to get on an antipsychotic? The ER doctor called and said, he's fine. This is delirium.
I was having constant breakdowns, meltdowns, anxiety attacks. So there was absolutely no mental health follow-up at all.
This frequency may be close to somebody that actually was in combat or somebody that was sexually assaulted. So it's incredibly common.
The first day out, sweating and stuff. Then I went into a panic attack. Because like this, I'm in a room by myself, and everything started to fall, coming down on me at once.
I got out of the hospital. I began to experience major depression and post-traumatic stress symptoms. And they surprised me so much because I thought I was through it. And then I just kept having all these nightmares where I was like fighting to wake up, fighting to wake up, fighting to wake up. I just reached a point where I wished I had died.
If you have somebody who gets out of the hospital from COVID, all communities need to have their mental health people ready to rock and roll. They're going to be pushed home with no support. And because their loved ones didn't watch them go through this, they don't know. They don't know. They don't know. They don't know.